Kia ora te whānau and welcome. Actually the wind's picking up a little bit. I was hoping that wouldn't happen. It's not Whitehorse, it's actually a nice bourbon. So yeah, cheers. Kia ora and greetings from New Zealand. You know, we've talked a lot about, we've talked a lot on this channel about, the steel and the spoor, right? We've talked about the trackers, the Ovambo veterans who could read a broken twig like a GPS, and the Casspir commanders who drove those 15-ton beasts through Mopani's scrub at speed, right? But there's a group of men that we haven't spoken about yet. He wasn't a policeman. He didn't wear the camouflage or the olive green of the SAP. He was usually a young, what we call blowchat, right? A national serviceman from the South African Medical Service, or SAMS. He was the ops medic, and if you were in a Zulu team, that man was the only thing standing between you and a permanent spot on that white Ovambo land sand. I'm going to reference Jim Hooper a little bit in this video. I don't know if you've read his book, Koevoet, but he actually rode with us for a while. And, he wrote in his book that these medics were the unsung aristocrats of the unit. He wasn't wrong. See, Koevoet was a police unit, but we were fighting a war that the manual said didn't exist, right? The police didn't have the trauma specialists for this kind of heat, so they reached out to the SADF, the South African Defence Force, and pulled out the SAMS medics. The SADF seconded them to the unit and dropped them basically into a world they never taught them about at the medical school in Pretoria, right? Imagine you're 19, right? You've done your training. You know your drips, your tourniquets, suddenly you're tossed into a Casspir with a bunch of sun-baked whiskey-drinking police operators who look at you like you're a tourist, You're the outsider. But that changes, let me tell you, the second that the lead starts flying, right? In the back of the Casspir, the ops medic lived in a world of diesel fumes, armor plate, and, high-intensity adrenaline. When the contact initiated, when, the Alouette started its 20 mil bark overhead, the medic didn't grab an R5 and join the fight, right? He was prepping. He was checking his jump bag. He was bracing himself for that call, medic, that crackled over the radio. Jim Hooper described it vividly. He said, the golden hour in that 40-degree heat, right? A man with a femoral bleed or with a chest wound doesn't have an hour. He has minutes. And that 19-year-old SAMS medic had to perform under, bundu bashing conditions, right? Imagine trying to start an IV line while the Casspir's slamming over a landmine-hardened track or, crashing through camelthorn trees. The floor in the back of the Casspir is slick with hydraulic fluid and blood and, bush debris. The dust is so thick you can hardly see your hands sometimes, but, he gets the line in, he stabilizes the tracker, or, he keeps the car commander's heart beating. He was the bridge. When the Zulu team was out there miles from the cut line, the medic was the one talking to the South African Air Force CasEvacs pilots, right? He had to decide if a man was priority one. He had to coordinate the lift while, the ground was still hot. There's a specific kind of silence that falls over a team when, that bird lifts off with one of your brothers and you see the medic standing there, covered in dust, his hands red, just watching the chopper disappear. Hooper noted that, these medics matured a decade in a single tour. They saw the darker side of the chase and of the contact. They weren't just treating bullet wounds, they were the ones who saw the exhaustion in the eyes of the trackers who had, just run 50 kilometers in the sun. They were relied upon to be our medical safety blanket. A lot was asked of them in those conditions. In that weekend base, we've talked about that before, the Sunday brides and the whiskey. The medic was right there, right? The segregation of the services kind of vanished, SAMS, SAP, SADF, it didn't matter, in the bush. It was, he was simply the doc, right? He was the man that ensured we rolled back through the gates of Oshikadi, with the same number of men as we left with. So if you're watching this and you were a SAMS medic seconded to a Zulu team, if you were the one holding the drip in the back of the Casspir while we were chasing a running spoor, I'm raising this glass to you. You were the heart of the machine. You were the steel and the soul. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Ka kite anō. We'll see you next time.